Intel is an interesting one to discuss. On one hand, it had its biggest loss in the company's history. On the other hand, it beat both financial analyst expectations. EPS it beat by 72%, and it beat on revenue by 5%, and it beat its own public forecasts. So it's really a tale of really glass half full or glass empty. I think your tweet captured it pretty well. That you're going to look at this through one of two lenses. If you want to get all negative on it, it's pretty easy. I tend to look at it as glass full, and the reason I do that is because the company has been in the midst of a 5-year turnaround. It's about 2 years in, 3 years left of what Pat Gelsinger committed, and different types of commitments, right? First of all, let's just get really tactical, right? There's a cost reduction commitment that was made, $3 billion of cost savings in 2023, $8 to $10 billion annually exiting 2025. So this isn't a company wantonly spending money; it's spending money for the future. As we always say, that as industry analysts, we track earnings because it is the closest source of truth we're ever going to get. The downside of saying something that's not true is it's steep because you get sued. So when the company says that it remains on track to regain transistor and power performance leadership by 2025, I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt because the downside of not hitting that is really, really bad. The company also reiterated they are on track to meet the goal of achieving 5 nodes in 2 years. 2 of the 5 are done. Intel 7 is high volume, and Intel 4 ramps with CCG's Meteor Lake, and they're going to launch it at the end of this the second half of this year. And Intel 3, 20A, and 18A, company says remains on track. That no way, shape, or form says that the company lacks risk. There is risk, right? There's a lot of execution to go. One thing I wasn't pretty enthused about is that the company did say it took share in client computing, which again, you got to look for some of the bright spots here. I wasn't expecting it. I don't think anybody else was expecting it either. Overall, right, the company reiterated, right, the macro view, the future view of the big opportunity in the markets, outlined the highlights of Q1, which I already rattled off those highlights, and then talked about strategic priorities moving with IDM 2.0 to IFS. So company continues to focus on what they can control. I mean, you really can't control the market. In some ways, you can't control your competitors. All you can do is control yourself. So probably the final thing that was a surprise, I think overall to everybody, is that the networking and data center market is in pretty dire shape. I saw a financial analyst talk about 30 weeks of CPU inventory out there in this space, and that's pretty crazy. And what we won't necessarily see, if the cloud providers are much better and more efficient at using their compute, then they don't need to buy as many chips as they thought that they needed, right? So even though, I mean, actually, we have seen a slowdown in public cloud, but not even close to the rate and the deceleration that we've seen by Intel in this space. I'm really interested to see how AMD does, to check up on that market share thing, and then see how the company did in its data center lineup.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of good points there, Pat. I mean, first of all, I'm going to be at risk of being the trend guy, but I think the future of Intel's success in a lot of ways is going to be its ability to attach to this strong adoption of artificial intelligence, proving that a lot of AI is still done on the CPU and making sure that it maintains and grows its market in that particular space. Because right now everybody's talking about GPUs and everybody's talking about accelerators, but a lot of inference, a lot of machine learning, a lot of utilization of AI within systems of record is still done on a CPU, and that's something that I don't know if Intel's getting a lot of credit for, because like I said, right now I think the market's kind of, and they call it DCAI, and I get it, but their actual, I know they're moving towards having some very specific data center GPUs, but really right now their big AI numbers have always been built into Xeon and into the way Xeon gets deployed for AI workloads. The other thing I think that was a really big sort of moment is this was the bottoming out of the margin. Now, if you look back maybe a decade, Intel had margins in the 60s. Intel's margin this quarter was 37.5%. So you can see why the market would have some concern about that. Having said that, you and I had a chance to talk to Pat Gelsinger after earnings, and I think we asked the right questions. We weren't, what's the optimism? And I mean, I think the optimism comes from a place of this really probably was, Pat, the final gulf in this kind of rundown that has been over several quarters, and where the company's strategy, being on track to launch their next process, the investments it's making in, 5 and 4 IDM, IFS are going to start turning a corner. The growth of AI at the edge, the return to, you mentioned the market share gains in client, are starting to be small indicators that we are going to maybe start to see this momentum turn. And again, as long and as slow as it took to turn downward, it's sometimes even longer and slower to turn back upward. But the company has huge percentages of customers. They have very deep and tied in roots and channels. And these channels don't change quickly either. The way distribution and goes to market is a long slog. Ask anybody who's tried to enter the PC market just how hard it is to enter this market. The demand for compute, as you said, may be down because compute is more efficient, but you look at the impact of AI and it's going to need more compute. And we know how much more compute. And like I said, it's not just going to be GPUs. It's going to, a lot of these things are parallel computing. You're going to have GPUs, you're going to need CPUs, you're going to need accelerators, you're going to need NPUs and IPUs and DPUs and all these, and obviously the disaggregation is leading to lots of different things. Now Intel's narrowed its focus. It's not in as many things as it was before. Hey, Pat, one thing we didn't call out, a bright spot, the lingering investment in Mobileye is paying off very well. Apparently Mobileye is growing at quite a nice clip, 16% this quarter. So they are still the largest shareholder of Mobileye, despite the fact that they spun that off from a financial standpoint. And Pat, the last thing I'm going to say is this, is Intel's long-term prospects, in my opinion, sit pretty heavily on its ability to execute its IFS strategy. I really do think, that you're going to see multiple compute platforms, x86, but also RISC-V and ARM and others, and the CHIPS Act and that whole thing. I know we got tired of talking about it now that there's not a supply chain issue anymore, but the ability to manufacture leading-edge chips here in the U.S. on multiple platforms, who else is going to do it but Intel? So if that trend is really going to happen, it's going to happen here, and that's a big opportunity for the company long term.
Yeah, TSMC and Samsung want to do it, but I don't think. I think once Intel, I think Intel's going to be competitive, and I think the country flips to local sourcing for super important infrastructure beyond the military. Dan, let's move into.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that we need to move forward. But if we actually are going to be people of our word in terms of what we did the CHIPS Act for, having Samsung and TSMC do it would be so ironic to me. Or is it hypocritical? I don't know. It'd be one of those two things. But it wouldn't. We do need to have some dependence on a company that we actually have that is domiciled in the USA. Otherwise, why did we go through this whole exercise?
Yeah, the country needs a strong intel, and I think Western Europe needs a strong intel as well. So U.S. and friends of
Oh,
U.S.
if
we're definitely getting
things go really
involved.
wrong, and if things go really wrong in China, Pat, so will TSMC will need a strong intel too. So
Good point. But TSMC is committed to not putting their leading edge in the United States. So there we have it.